Good afternoon. It is an honor and frankly terribly intimidating to be invited today. The Norse libraries have a reputation, excuse me, over in the States of being of one, excellence, and two, high quality, love from your communities, and being terribly smart people. So I fit none of these criteria, so I have a lot to learn. I also am assured that your English is better than my Swedish. But I have a bit of a reputation for talking quickly. So I need 2 volunteers in the front row. Oh, look at them volunteering. They're jumping. Hi. All right. Your job, I'll just recruit all of you. If I start talking too fast, just look horrified. Now, this is very important. You cannot look horrified for any other reason, based on what I say, based on where I'm going. Today, I'd like to talk to you about sort of a new project percolating and getting started, but with a larger context. I want to talk about grand challenges of the library and information science field. I think all too often, we are thinking about our future. Now, it's not too bad that we're thinking about our future, but it's the way we think about our future. We go through a lot of what's the future going to do to us? What will my future be? How can we change? What's going to happen to us? And the future of libraries has become a rather myopic conversation. It's become all about us, as opposed to asking, why are we doing any of this in the first place, and does anyone care? I think sometimes we're so consumed with the future and we're so consumed with technology that we feel that I get the sense that we're chasing our users and our patrons through technology. That we're just, as soon as we can catch up to them and show them our brilliant collections of materials, they'll realize that they should have left us to begin with. It's a sort of, where are they going? The French philosopher, please find out where that mob is going so I can get in front and lead them. I think we may have some of that going on. Now, this may be a slightly, before we get into the majority of the comments, I need to be really upfront that a lot of my comments today, a lot of my discussion comes from a decidedly North American perspective, which is terribly skewed. I mean, let's face it, right now the average understanding of Norse culture in America is that Thor was an Australian actor whose father was Anthony Hopkins. And yeah, you think that's funny. Just imagine how pissed the Vikings and IKEA are at this point, right? Now, I noticed that you get some American TV over here, so I can only imagine that the image of Americans over here are sort of obese teenagers driving around in trucks shooting people who can't afford health care. We're working on that. We're forcing the people they shoot to somehow afford health care, but it's definitely a U.S. perspective. So, where are we going? Where we're going is that I think that we need to spend some time not worrying about chasing people online, not worried about looking at what they're doing so that we can somehow mold ourselves so that we can show up there and not know why we're there. I think we need to spend a lot more time worrying about what those folks need and less time worrying about making ourselves look like those folks. I was a great talk yesterday morning, and the discussion about how teenagers and digital natives and all these folks work online. And I'd like to remind you of something. I'm not a huge millennial fan. I mean, I think it was Socrates talking about these darn kids and their reading and how it's going to kill memory. I mean, it's sort of traditional for us to think of children and as different than us. The difference is today we think that somehow they're better than us. And I don't know about you, but if you're a digital native, to really be a truly digital native, we're talking maybe 14 years, right? 14 years where the web and technology and telecommunications have really brought it sort of front and center. I mean, honestly, maybe 7 years where it's become truly ubiquitous, where we expect it and we use it. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was 14 years old, I was stupid. I mean, when I was 20, I was an idiot. I'm like in my 40s and only now starting to make sense, and that's a self-reflection that may not be borne out by other people. So this idea that what's happening now, how people are searching information, how people are looking at information, is important and useful. But let's not assume that that's what the web is going to look like when it grows up. Let's not assume that's what those 13 and 14-year-olds are going to look like when they grow up. Let's take some time and think about what we want as a society to do with deep information, deep intellect, thought. What do we want to make? I want to spend the bottom line of today of being proactive. Instead of sitting back and saying what's going to happen to us, let's take some time to say, what do we want to happen? Instead of chasing people online, let's take some time to make ourselves so useful and attractive that they will come to us. I think oftentimes in the library world, we undersell our value. Librarianship is a 3,000-year-old tradition. And in that time, we've only managed to salvage civilization like 4 times. Right? That's the level of impact that this profession can have. This profession brought us out of the dark ages. This profession led to massive expansion in science and law and industry. This profession led to expansion of commerce around this world. This profession led to the formation and maintenance of democracy. That's the level that we need to think at. That is the impact that we can have. And so I want to talk a little bit about how do we meet that impact. Bottom line, we need to stop worrying about what folks are doing. We certainly need to spend a lot less time worrying about what's going to happen to us and a lot more time thinking about what our communities and our societies need. What do we do that helps out these folks? What is it that we should do to provide for the communities that we serve? What do they need? If we can figure that out, we can move forward, we can advance, we can create a brighter day for librarianship. What we need to ask ourselves are, what are the grand challenges? What are the big, big issues that our communities, our societies are facing? And then shape around those. Then look at how our mission matches and to a great degree shapes and answers those challenges. And only then should we spend time in processes and tools. Now, the other thing that intimidates me when I come over to Sweden, this is my second trip, but in Europe in general, is that when library and information scientists get together, there's this really interesting divide between the Europeans and the Americans. The Europeans are all about epistemology and theory, and the Americans are like not just pragmatic, but to the point of being mercenary in how we do things. If we can't touch it and code it, it doesn't exist. I mean, I really think we need to make an island somewhere in the middle where we can both understand what we're doing and do it at the same time. But the processes and tools is not going to be the focus of my conversation today. We're not going to spend a huge amount of time in what do I do, how do I do, show me another library that does it. Here's the question, and I know I shouldn't do this. Here's the question I do not want you to ask. Can you give me an example of someone else that's doing it? The reason is, you should be doing it. And the way you do it in your community is going to be very different than how it's done in other communities. It amazes me that I can walk into a library, a beautiful, gorgeous library, by the way, next door, and it rings familiar to a kid who grew up in the Midwest of the United States. Because the Swedish people and the Ohioans are just so alike in so many ways. What is it that our communities need, and shape ourselves around them instead of shaping ourselves around each other? Instead of saying we must have a reference desk here, we must have the collection here, and this must be over here, we must do cataloging this way. How do we need to do it here? All right, so let's start with grand challenges. First of all, this is work, I'm not going to take credit, that's gone on by a lot of people. We sort of put together a working group in the States, including folks, academics like Andy Dillon, Mary Stansberry, Sam Hastings, Tula Giannini, from some academics. You notice these are all US folks. We want to expand the conversation. We got some, Bill Schickling from Polaris, Corinne Hill, the Dallas Public Library. We have 4 state librarians, and we sort of said, what's the big question? Not what's the future of the library, what's the big question for the library? What's the big grand challenge that is facing our society? So what's a grand challenge? A grand challenge is a society-level problem that is solvable and has high potential rewards. This is very different than, say, a research agenda approach where we said, this is what we need to know, and we lay it out into an agenda, and we parcel it out. A grand challenge says, this is what we need to solve, and then the community and multiple communities participate and innovate and find their own ways of solving it. The classic example of a grand challenge was sequencing the human genome, the DNA. We said, in biology they said, if we could only know how the DNA works, we could invent new treatments, we could invent new tests, we could invent new drugs, we could invent whole new ways of solving problems. And it's a big problem, a couple of million base pairs. And it's going to take us 20 years to do it, but it's worth doing it. This set up two competing groups. One group, through the government and the university sector, said, all right, we're on it, we're going to try. And a commercial group that said, we're going to do it, because if we can do it, that's going to lead to money and medicines and the things that we can profit from. About 3-4 years in the effort, they actually merged, and they got it done 10 years ahead of schedule. So it was a hard problem, but it was one that ultimately, by solving it, has opened up whole new ideas of genetics, medical treatment. Supercomputing, they talk about terascale, and they talk about these kinds of things. What is our grand challenge? What is the grand challenge that library and information science can solve? Right? What is solvable, has a large potential, right? Well, I'm going to give you what I think it is. I'm going to give you what this group sort of came out with, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing. The first thing I want you to note is the challenge is not within us. In other words, this is not what do we do to ourselves. This is what does society need to be done. So we exist in a knowledge society, right? This is not my phrase. I actually found it in a nice little report on the future of Nordic libraries. So I read. And it said, we are in a knowledge society. Now, we've already talked about, and you've already heard over these days, major differences about a knowledge society. For example, the nature of what is knowledge and what is deep thought is changing. So we heard talk of the difference of flicking between multiple things and searching information this way and not this way. So we've had discussions about how it's changing, but one of the major things is how do we as a society, as a knowledge society, accept multiple ways of coming to a solution? How do we deal with the reality of truth by consensus? Now, this will drive many people insane. They will simply say, no, there is truth and there is not truth. Don't bother me with the details. Yeah, yes, sort of. There's my truth, there's your truth, there's perspective. I mean, the thing is that once we get into the hard problems, things get messy. Things get really messy. Libraries and information science has thrived over the past 50 years of solving the easy problems. What are the easy problems? Things we can throw computing at. Searching through millions and millions and millions of documents, easy problem. Finding relevance ranking for them, easy problems. What Google and Bing and the search engines have solved are fundamentally easy problems of sorting through a bunch of stuff. Now, you're looking at me like I'm crazy, but think about it. What we're doing is what humans do, but faster. That's a computing problem. What we're running into now are the hard problems, which is, does this mean anything? How do I put it into use? Is this good information or bad information? How do I take this information and make the world a better place, make a better choice? Knowledge management. How do I deal with the fact that you believe this page and you think this page is garbage? Those are hard problems. Those are fundamentally human problems. So how we deal with this nature of multiple visions and views of truth is a hard problem. Now, within this knowledge society exists a knowledge economy. And it is a very different economy than what it looks like. A lot of what we're dealing with in the so-called developed world is a shift in how this economy functions. For example, this economy requires a skilled workforce as never before. It requires people who can not only manually fix and move stuff, but they can think about it, they can plan, they can challenge. We have the major economic engines of this knowledge society are content producers, are media production, are people who can talk about how do we find information, manipulate information. The importance of innovation. The innovation of this economy, this knowledge economy, requires new ideas into it all the time, right? So I've seen everyone wandering around with their latest Steve Jobs fashion piece, right? Why is there a new one of these every 18 months? Why is there a new one of these every 18 months? Why? Because they want my money, and they want your money. And how are they going to get it? Well, it's Apple, so all they have to do is say it's version 2. Yes, but most of us, most companies have to add some value to it. They have to add some new features. I actually had someone say, well, they're done. There can't be a 3. There's nothing else they can do to it. Yes, they can. They knew what they were going to do to it 10 years ago. They're sitting there going, no, wait till they see the 3D camera. Right? Whatever it is. All right, to be honest, the big innovation with the latest iPad was, in fact, the case. But we'll get off this. This economy thrives on novelty. It thrives on new stuff. It thrives on innovation. This is changing, for example, that workforce again. Now what we're teaching in business schools and information schools is not how to find a job. Increasingly, we're teaching how to make a job. We're teaching people how to create their own new industries. We live in a world where 98% of the jobs that held by children entering the primary level this year don't exist yet. 98% of the jobs that those 4- and 5-year-olds are going to have don't exist yet. Start your curriculum now, right? How do we teach them? What do we teach them? What do we do about this stuff? How do we set standards for it? This is a different world. This impacts our distribution of resources. Where do we put the money? Where do we put the stuff? Do we invest in libraries? Do we invest in schools? Do we invest in tax incentives? Do we invest in industry? Do we invest in government? And it's changing the nature of education. It's changing how we educate folks. Instead of a lot of this, it's much more of meeting in small groups. The model that we're beginning to adopt in higher education is that people do their homework in the classroom and their classwork at home. Right? I mean, let's face it. I mean, it's great. I'm glad you all showed up. Don't get me the wrong way. But you could have watched me at home. It would have been equally interactive. Maybe not a lot of this or threatening you with speaking, but the same thing. And then we could have come to Visby, which is gorgeous. We could have gone and hung out at the walls and talked about, what do you want to do in your library? How about this? And we could have done a very different thing. Think about that. Think about your Masters of Library Science. How many classes did you sit in with professors doing this at you, and then going home and going, now what in the world was he or she talking about? Wouldn't it be more interesting to hear the lecture, go in and say, now what were you talking about? And done that work together. So the knowledge society and the knowledge economy is changing. Now, underlying this knowledge society is an infrastructure. That infrastructure consists of technology, yes. That's our wires, our bits, our bytes, our copper, our fiber, right? That's Google, that's Bing, that's whatever it is, all right? But more importantly, that infrastructure consists also of people who make decisions, people who make things happen, people who invest, people who set policy. Sources of information, digitized collections, digital libraries, physical books, physical materials, databases, resources, music. And it consists of permissions, which match people to sources over technology. What you're allowed to see and for how much. Who owns what. So this infrastructure is underneath everything we do. And what's important to know about this infrastructure is that it is currently uncoordinated and oftentimes conflicted. That the infrastructure that we are depending upon to take us into new areas and to innovate and to build economies, to build opportunities, to build great societies, to advance our culture, is uncoordinated and often at odds with each other. Think about that for a minute. We're talking about moving whole nations over to an infrastructure that's not done yet. that will never be done, but oftentimes works against it. So I'm sure over this time you've heard things like Google is your friend and your enemy, right? Google lets you do lots of stuff as long as they own your data, right? Microsoft will help you do lots of stuff as long as you buy their operating systems. Oh, and Microsoft and Bing don't get along, and Facebook has now hired people to slander Google, so forget about swapping information between that and the cloud. We've got whole new types of information that people depend upon that we don't know if they will exist in 1 year. Think about Wikipedia. I love Wikipedia. I use Wikipedia all the time. You know what the real threat to Wikipedia is? It's not credibility. The real threat to Wikipedia is not money. It's not the infrastructure. It's whether it's cool or not. Think about that for a minute. There's nothing to say that within 2 months, Wikipedia can't be a bunch of spam and people putting up advertisements and people defacing things and no one cares. Because it's MySpace. And we don't need to pay attention to that anymore. Let's not even get into the idea that increasingly it's the apps that sit on our phones and sit on our iPads and sit everywhere that have information that are vital to our lives. Where are they stored? How do we get at those? Who's allowed to see them? Who's allowed to preserve them for the future? We have walled gardens now of vital information that we do not know if we can get into. And worst of all, this uncoordinated and conflicted infrastructure is producer and consumption oriented. It helps you buy things. It helps you see advertisement that makes you want to buy things. We have existed for so long in a culture of me provider, you consumer, that it's become ingrained in what we do. Think about your members, your library patrons. What is your role with them? Is your role to make them into good consumers? They're going to shop for something, you want them to be educated about it? Or is your job to make them into participants, people who are going to shape the society that they're a part of? Think about your own libraries. Have libraries now become nothing more than collective buying agencies? When we stopped buying collections, when we stopped buying materials, what we became were renters and licensors of databases. Is that our role, that a community can in essence pool their tax funds so that we can buy it for the community? Or is our role to help those communities be better citizens, to be better producers, to produce new material, to engage in a debate, to break down the walls between those who have and those who have not? So the grand challenge that our communities face, that the LIS, the libraries can be a part of, that the libraries can be a major solution to, is to coordinate that infrastructure. Our DNA mapping, our genetic sequencing, our grand challenge is to help bring some sanity to that knowledge infrastructure, to move it to a participation-oriented site, to move it to a place of lifelong learning, where after that kindergarten gets the job that didn't exist, they can keep the job and move to a new job and make a new job. That our citizens can constantly investigate, are politicians making their best decisions? How can I participate in government? How can I make sure that the culture is preserved, that the knowledge that's created here is used here and everywhere? How can we create a seamless transfer of knowledge from the local to the global? One of the things we looked at the internet, think about this consumer-oriented view. Most internet connections are what are called asymmetric. Means you get more data down than you can put up. You can download 5 encyclopedias per second. You can upload half a picture you took at lunch, right? Why? Because we believe that people are going to use these big fat internet pipes not to organize revolutions in Egypt, but to watch videos at home, to consume. When you pull that pipe into your communities, do you look at it as providing access for your community to the world? Or do you look at it as providing the world access to your community? Libraries are a place not to simply come to learn about the rest of the world, but where your citizens, your community, your members can share their vision, their view, their power with that rest of that world. They can become publishers, and transmitters of that information. Now, you may ask, who, me? Libraries are going to do that? What the hell? Google's going to do that. We're just watching. Right? Oh, no, that's the government's job. Who am I, the lowly librarian, to coordinate the global knowledge infrastructure? Well, you're librarians, damn it, and that's your job. Whether you like it or not, if you don't do it, someone else will, and you probably won't like how it turns out. And if you abdicate your responsibility to do it, if you said Google will do it, the government will do it, these folks will do it, then you are to blame if it doesn't work out. Because it is your job to stand up. It is your mission to stand up. So what is the mission of a librarian? What is our mission as librarians? Here's what they are not. Whoops. That's what it is. That's what it's not. It's not stuff. Now, I don't speak Swedish, but I have Google Translator at my side. And I'm going to go to every one of your libraries, and I'm going to find your mission statement, if you have one. You do, because they forced you to have a committee that made a mission statement. And I'm going to guarantee about half of them are going to use the word, the library shall. Libraries can't do crap. They're buildings. What they do is exert gravity and fall apart. That's what buildings do. The librarians do. The other thing it's going to do is, we provide access to books. Sure. Is that it? We were having this discussion this morning. People, when they view libraries, they view it as a place to lend books. Sure. But they also now look at it as a place to access technology. And increasingly, when you access technology, you're not doing it to consume, you're accessing it to talk to your buddies. Facebook and Twitter and all these kinds of things. Libraries have always been more about it. Artifacts, not our job. They're tools. They're tools that we use and have used effectively for thousands of years, but they're still tools. Don't be like the newspapers and confuse what you do with how you do it. Journalism exists even though it's not printed on cheap paper. It's still journalism. Libraries exist. Libraries existed before books. Maybe you've heard of this thing called the Library of Alexandria. Not too many books in it, right? Would you walk into the Library of Alexandria? This is not a library. They have all this paper rolled up. What is that, right? It's not about buildings. It's not about buildings. Buildings are great tools. It's important, but it's just a tool. Imagine for a minute, instead of defining a librarian by the people who work in a building called a library, we did it the other way around. A library is the infrastructure, the tools, and the place that librarians do their work. Think about that subtle switch. What that means is, if you're at home, home's the library. If you're online, online's the library. If you're visiting a patron in their workplace, that's the library. It used to be that when we took the library out to people, we had to put a diesel engine in front of it and drive it. Actually, I've been to Boras. I saw a library history museum. You used to put them on donkeys and carry carts out to people. Now, that's it. Now I can bring it with me. People thought, oh, ebooks are going to put libraries out of business. Bring them on. The more stuff that I have access to electronically, the more I can bring the library with me anywhere I want. It used to be that accountants worked in places called accountancies. You would take your ledgers, you would take your books to a building, and accountants would work it out. People began saying, this is rather inconvenient. Let's just hire that accountant to work here. And where are we? More accountants than ever, any other time in history, fewer accountancies. I think a good future is more librarians than ever, fewer buildings. I'm okay with that one, right? It's not about information. It's not about information. It's not about information. What do you mean? Of course it is. No, it isn't. What is information? This is the interactive portion of our day. Messages. It's your dime. No, it's knowledge, but it's right. Here's the clue. I have a PhD in information science. I'm a doctor of information science. I don't know what information is. I know what data is, ones and zeros, bits and bytes. I know what knowledge is. We're going to talk about that more. It's how we act and view the world. Information, it's a word we made up to say that stuff, right? Database, what's that? It's information. Web, what's that? It's information. My dog, information. But we don't know. So when you use this word, we're in an information society, what does it mean? We don't talk about information overload because we don't have a problem with too much information. We have a problem with making the information useful. We're in the knowledge business. We're in the business of not simply informing someone, but making sure that they are more knowledgeable, that they can act, that they can change the world around them. It's not about the catalog, it's not about reference, it's not about interlibrary loan. What is the mission of librarians? The mission of librarians is to improve society. To improve society. Let me say that again. To improve society. You need to think at that scale. Every day you walk into your library, if you're the only librarian or one of 50, your job that day, improve society. You open the door in the morning, you're improving society. You're lending out a book, how is that improving society? If you're holding a meeting, how is that improving society? By being in here, ask yourself, how is that improving society? And how do we do that? We facilitate knowledge creation in our communities. We don't inform, right? Inform is like the closest thing we have to a transitive verb. I informed you, right? It's like, I ran over your dog. I sent you an email. Didn't you see that I ran over your dog? I informed you. Right? We treat information, the thing I hate about information is it sounds so cold, and it sounds so clinical, and it sounds so boring, right? Knowledge is hot. Knowledge is passionate. Knowledge is change. Knowledge is making a difference. How do we change society? We're in the knowledge game. And we don't just give you other people's knowledge, we help you make your own, right? In our communities. Now, there are some key words here I want to just spend a minute on, right? So what do I mean by mission? What do I mean by librarians? What do I mean by, you get the point. Let me just pick on a few of them. Let me start with the one that the epistemologists will get most mad at me at. Knowledge creation. What does it mean to create knowledge? Well, first of all, this ain't knowledge. These things, these books, these materials are not knowledge. They are a pale, pale reflection and echo of knowledge. They're important. Please do not walk out of here and say, Dave hates books. Not true. Dave says books are unimportant. Not true. But they are important only in that they help people create knowledge. How do people create knowledge? They create them through conversations. These are conversations. We're having conversations right now. One, I'm talking at you, yay. But two, in your mind, you're having a lot of conversations. Is that English? Should I look horrified yet? Do I believe him? Do I not believe him? That's an internal conversation. When you read a book, you're not having a conversation with the book. It doesn't talk back. And if it does, see someone about that. You're certainly not having a conversation with the author, right? You know, so if I read, was it the girl who stepped on the hornet's nest? I'm sorry, Stieg Larsson? Yes? Not talking back these days. You know, we're not having a conversation with the author. We're having a conversation with ourselves. Do I believe it? Do I agree with it? Now, that's knowledge. And knowledge isn't some cold, only comes from a textbook world. It can be knowledge about ourselves. The best knowledge comes from fiction, comes from art, comes from culture, comes from society, where we ask ourselves, what does it mean to be Swedish? What does it mean to be Scandinavian? What does it mean to be a good citizen? That's knowledge. And by the way, 1 + 1 = 2 is knowledge, but when the first time someone learns that, when they're 3 or 4, they're creating knowledge. It may not be new knowledge to the world, but it's new to them. So don't take creating knowledge as must come out with brand new stuff no one's ever thought about before. Sometimes it's recreating it within ourselves. So books and materials are not knowledge. They're containers, they're artifacts, right? So for example, I've been watching the Twitter feed from this conference. Usually that helps me see what's going on in a conference. Not so much when the tweets are in Swedish and I don't speak it, right? Those tweets are artifacts. They're information, if we want to use that word, but to me, they're useless. Sorry, right? To you, they're valuable. They're useful communication, right? How can this one thing be knowledge to someone and not knowledge to the other? It comes from me. It comes from inside. This encyclopedia of Swedish animals can mean very different things to different people. To some people, it's knowledge about wildlife. To other people, it's great pictures to take out of. To other people, it looks impressive on my desk. Right? Have you ever been into a law firm? Do you guys still have lawyers that have lots of law books? Do you know why they have lots of law books in law firms? It's not to know the law. In fact, I was at a lawyer the other day, and I said, watch this, to my wife, and I walked off, and I pulled off one of the books, and I went, dust everywhere. Why do they have it? Because it makes them look smart. It intimidates you, right? That's a different thing. This container can have many, many different contexts. Knowledge exists solely in here. It is constructed by ourselves and constructed by the group of people we talk to, right? It's like we were talking about reference. If someone comes and asks you a reference question, you're probably not the only one they asked, right? So they ask you a question, you give information. They talk to their mom. They talk to their friends, they talk to their boss, they talk to their brother. And only after they've had all of these conversations do they say, this is what I believe now. They have socially constructed knowledge. This, by the way, is why universal classification systems, be it the Dewey Decimal System or the Swedish classification systems, break down. You can learn them like learning another language, but if you don't learn them, they may not make sense. So you guys adopted Dewey, I understand. Yay, Dewey. Right? Another bald guy with a beard from Central New York. Thank you very much. Melville Dewey, in the Dewey Decimal Classification System, has something for cookery. Now, if you do speak English pretty well and that word doesn't mean anything to you, I speak English pretty well and that word means nothing to me. But in the 19th century, cookery was called cooking, right? And why did he put it in industrial arts and business? Because that's what women do. That classification system is a point of view on the world. It came from a misogynist anti-Semite in New York, right? It has baggage. There is no such thing as some sort of universally understood idea. That's why we have these kinds of meetings, to argue and converse to the truth. And just to finish this off, not knowledge, not knowledge, not knowledge. Knowledge. All of these can be useful in producing it. All of these are tools that you can bring to bear, but ultimately what your real job is what's going on in here. To facilitate someone's thinking, to facilitate them getting information, churning that information, finding that information, and then making sense of the information. Your job as a librarian doesn't end when you hand someone a book. It certainly does not end when they return the book or you have to chase them down. Your job ends only when that person says, I've learned what I wanted to know. And if you don't ask them, did you learn what you wanted to know? How will you know you're finished? Your job does not end at the doorway. It does not end when that person walks away. It only ends when, you guessed it, we've improved society. Maybe just that much. Maybe that much. Let's talk about what I mean by facilitating. To date, the majority of facilitating has gone around this idea of access. The way people build knowledge is I give them access to stuff. I build buildings, I shelve them, I pay license fees, I put them online. I've done my job, right? Wrong. Access does not mean learning, does not mean facilitation. It is a vital and important role, but is insufficient, right? If you take a 2-year-old and you take them next door to the library and you take them to the children's section, you give them a cookie and you leave for 2 days and come back, they will not have learned to read. By the way, I understand most of you probably have experience where parents think different, but, right? Access is not enough. You can't say, hold on a moment. Yes. Not enough. But look at your budgets. 90% of your budgets between cataloging, acquisitions, licensing of database, staff time devoted to collections are about access. But it's not enough. What else do we need? Well, one, we need a basic knowledge. For example, those Twitter feeds. I'm looking at them, I have access to them, but it's not knowledge. It's not making a difference to me. I need to know what to do with it. Either I need to learn Swedish. That's not looking good, folks. I failed a lot of French in high school, and I'm looking at Swedish, and you've got more letters. All right, so, but here's Google Translate, which is just funny. I mean, you know, you got it. Like is coming soon. What? No. Anyway, so I need a basic knowledge. I need access to that, and then I need some knowledge of how to make it make sense. You guys have probably done this. It's in English. Could you translate it for me? It's in this language. Could you provide it in different ways? Computer literacy, instruction, teaching people how to get online, right? That's important. It's a growing part of our field, and it should. But even that's not enough, right? So I have access to this. I now know how to turn it on. Now I need a safe environment to do it in, right? So if I, for example, how many people, no, don't answer this question. I see a few screens up, and the screens that are farther to the back are more likely to have solitaire on them, right? Everyone sitting in the front row, not playing solitaire. Everyone in the back row, oh yeah, right? Why? Because we have to be seen as busy. Did you know there's an interesting study? Your brain requires you to be active. It always needs something to do. And if you don't give it enough to do, it will find something to do, right? So when you're in a meeting and it's like this guy droning on and on and on and on, solitaire actually makes sense. Yes. Because there's certain tasks like doodling, for people who are good at knitting, that are repetitive enough that your brain's engaged just enough, but not so much that you lose the main track of things. So when I see students doodling or knitting or even playing solitaire, that's fine because it's a way of learning. But if we set up environments like, you will not have computers, no cell phones in the library, no this, no that, how safe of an environment are we creating? Now, safety can be physical safety, but it can also be intellectual safety. We will not track your records. We will not disclose your records. We believe in privacy. That's a form of safety. Now, the other example I give is how many people have if you have library staff meetings, and in the staff meeting, you have the historian, right? The historian is the person that always says, what you must remember is, right? Let's blog. What you must remember is, in 1932, we tried blogging. And it didn't work out very well. Right? How did you try blogging? It was done with slate tablets. We did it outside the library. Whenever it rained, it was gone. Right? That's not a safe environment. How many people have you had a professor that has created a hostile learning environment? It goes like this. Professor Lankus, interesting point, but what about, and the professor walks up and goes, well, that is an interesting point. I guess my PhD and 20 years in the field don't matter very much, but that's all right. You think what you want. Right? Oh, yeah, I'm raising my hand again, right? That's not a safe environment as well. How safe of an environment can we create? And finally, motivation. Why are they there? Why do they even belong here? Now, librarians are great at a very specific type of motivation called intrinsic motivation. We're really good when people care enough to come to us. And we all have stories of people who said, that book you gave me, oh, changed my life, right? They're the ones we want. But I have bad news for you. People don't always do what's in their own self-interest. People can be stupid. Case in point, right? There are things that our communities do, that our governments do, that our companies do, that our libraries do, that are not good, not in our own self-interest. Libraries must become much better aware of extrinsic motivation. We must understand that there are times when we need to set up a reward system that goes beyond the individual. Academic librarians, do I have any academic librarians? You have a tenure system? No, cool, well we won't have that conversation. All right, academic librarians, you know that there are things, how many people, you have the assignment, it's like the first year, freshman year assignment, right? English normally, must do a paper on something, and they walk in and they say, I gotta do a paper, which I'm sure sounds much more interesting in Swedish, but same idea. Now you know they have to do a paper, not only do you know how to do the paper, you've written the paper 300 times, you have like 500 sources sitting behind the desk to answer their question, and what do? Oh, a paper. On what topic, do tell? It's like a person in history. A person in history, fascinating. Did a professor give you this assignment? Yes, Professor Jones. Oh, I've never heard of him. All syllabus from like 50,000 years. Right? What are we doing? Are we doing, well, one, we're being cruel, let's be honest, and enjoying it. But two, we're forcing them to go through a reference transaction. We're forcing them to go through a learning process. That's extrinsically motivated. They wouldn't do this on their own. But we feel it's valuable for them to learn how to do it. Right? That's extrinsically motivated. All right? So we need to, this is what we can do. Now we spend a lot of time on access, but how much time do we spend on knowledge, environment, and such? The other thing, it's part of our mission, and where I will end up, and then we can have conversations, is to improve society. What does that mean? Here's how not to improve society. I'll wait, right? Whatever you want to do, we'll wait, we'll figure it out. Oh, this whole Google thing, we'll just wait till that finishes, and then we'll figure it out. Oh, these app things, we'll wait for that, we'll figure it out. We'll collect it when they're done. Librarians have at their core a notion of service. Librarians are of service. We believe service above and beyond all things. And that is a really powerful thing. It is important that librarians believe in service. It is important that librarians understand that they serve the community. But we must not mistake service for transparency. We must not mistake service for invisibility. When someone comes and asks us our question, we shape the answer, we shape the question. If someone asks you a question and the first thing you do is reach for a book or start typing, you begin to shape it. Your very appearance shapes what they can expect from you. The very fact that they entered into a library, big, small, shapes the question. How many people have walked into a library and said, I feel smarter? Right? We all have libraries that, huge wooden panels and high arches and stained glass. You walk in, you're like, I'm smarter for being here. The environment we produce shapes that. There is no such thing as unbiased. There is no such thing as transparent. In providing service, you are shaping the community that you are a part of. We have as our goal to extend service beyond our building. In the States, it's crazy. In the States, we say things like, we will not track what you look at and what you read. We will preserve your privacy. Right? Yes, we will do that. We just neglect to mention that if you actually accessed any of those services over an internet service provider or from the home, the internet service provider can track everything you've done. So we've actually created a false sense of security in those people who are using our services. We've actually made them more vulnerable to prosecution. Our service must extend beyond our buildings. Our ideals must extend beyond our committees. We must take and actively make those values, those visions, those that understanding of the social good, we must make that part of our governments and our companies and our individuals and our students and our learners. Our service cannot stop by sitting and waiting to be asked. Service must be proactive. We must go into our communities and shape and change them. We must be in the innovation business. If we are in the knowledge business, if knowledge is in our head, what we are doing is about learning. When someone asks for a book or searches on database or sits in the corner, they're learning. And learning means to change your view of the world. It could be that much. When was Britney Spears born? But we know it can be huge. Every librarian I know has within them a story. It's the story that they brag out when things are bad, when the committee's too long, when they look at the budgets, when they look at criticisms. This is the story they reach for. That story is almost always about, I helped change someone's life. I helped a kid discover the love of reading. I helped a wife escape an abusive relationship. I helped a person find job. I helped someone find dignity. I helped someone explore a whole new world. That story within us that we hold on to is a story of innovation, is a story of change, is a story of how we positively changed a life. Very, very, very rarely does it ever involve, I watched someone take a book from the shelf. Very rarely is it, and I looked at the weblog and I saw that they clicked. It's almost always when I can look them in the eye, maybe on the phone, it's almost always a personal connection. It's almost always about humanity and the basic humanness. And it's always about change. If that is the story that you hold on to, if that is the story about why you became a librarian, how can you expect any less of your library? How can you expect your library to be less about change, or less about human connection, or less about innovation? How can we expect positive, radical change in our communities if we are risk-averse and conservative and don't want to change? A library should be a cauldron of learning. It should be a place of new opportunities, new ideas, and new excitement every day. You as a librarian need to relearn your job every day and love it. That's what librarianship is about. It is about innovation. And ultimately, it is about leadership. To go out into that community, to say, this is not right. We need more funding. We need legislation about privacy. We need a community action. We need transparency. We need more classrooms. We need better understanding. We need less censorship and more openness. We must own our records, own our systems. We don't like what the publishers are doing, we become publishers. We don't like the ebook options, we build ebooks. We don't like what the search engines are doing, we build search engines. That is what librarianship is about. We have changed society over the millennia. We have brought it from the Dark Ages. We have developed mathematics. We have brought about massive understandings in ancient cultures. We were the missionaries that went with the Crusaders. We look at this and we understand that to be a librarian is to think at a societal level, that no challenge is too grand. How dare you equate librarianship with books? How dare you question whether librarians can solve the grand challenges of our society? How dare you pull back on the great 3,000-year conversation that we have been having and keep your voice to yourself? Ultimately, what we must be as librarians is we must be the missionaries, we must be the saviors, we must be the teachers. We must seek out power to empower. We must build tools to understand them. We must engage conversations. Ultimately, what we must do in Sweden and throughout the Nordic area, throughout the world, is librarianship is too important to keep to ourselves. Librarianship is too important to bottle it up in our buildings. Librarianship is too important not to solve the grand challenges of our society. You have to do it today. You have to start every day. Do not settle. Do not be put down. Do not accept second place. Do not become the comfortable, quiet, romantic image. Become radicals. Become change agents. Scare the hell out of your communities. That's what we seek to do. Thank you very much.